A very good morning to all of you. Welcome to today's news analysis. We are doing the Indian Express papers, Chandigarh edition. You can see the important topics that we are going to cover for today's news. If you wish, you can take a screenshot. Okay. So first of all, from today's newspaper, we have an update on the international news. So it starts with this. So first of all, we hear about floods in Libya. Libya is in north of Africa. In fact, yesterday itself, we covered that Libya was bracing Storm Daniel, right? So that was already in news. So maybe because of the storm, the floods have taken place, a lot of rains. So that may be the outcome. Moving on, we have a news concerning Sri Lanka. So Colombo, capital of Sri Lanka, rejects United Nations Human Rights Council's claims on reforms failure. So what we can understand from the headline itself, that the human rights arm of the United Nations had told Sri Lanka or Colombo that they have to undertake political and democratic reforms. Fine. Human rights reforms, of course, it has to be political and democratic in nature. So this has been rejected by Sri Lanka. And I was wondering, why are they talking about this? You should also think, why are they talking, human rights agency getting into it, and what reforms were recommended? So they recommended the following. These days with this chat GPT thing, you get a lot of this information, right? So I'll just sum it up over here. So they want the dilution of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, Sri Lanka's own law, dilution of this, because this law may be used, malpractices taking place, so human right violation taking place under the garb of anti-terror law. Then the concern associated with repatriation of the victims of the civil war of 2009. So that is also there, and bringing people to justice who committed the gory, bad crimes during this time period. By the way, civil war of 2009 was, this is Sri Lanka. So the northern part over here, like this, is Tamil dominated. And there was this militant organization known as LTTE, which represented Tamil. So LTTE versus the majority Sinhalese Sri Lanka. So this was the representing the government. They fought and they completely eradicated LTTE during this war. But during this process, lot of torture, just killings in a very bad way took place during this time period. Okay. Don't even think of Googling it, it's that bad. Okay, so Civil War 2009. Then we have the Easter attack of 2019, investigations going on regarding that. So in that also human rights concerns are there. Okay, so these are the three issues. Sri Lanka is saying that we are not in a position, plus the economic, we are already reeling under the crisis of the economic crisis of 2022. Now, I would like to add one thing. And by the way, I did make a video on the civil war of Sri Lanka and how it concerns India with the entire background. If you want, you can refer that also. Okay. Now, how does it concern India? Because India also recommended to Sri Lanka that they have to take certain reforms. So you see, LTT is, the northern part is Tamil. And if any thing happens with Tamil, it will affect the Tamil sentiments within India. So it affects the domestic politics of India as well. And therefore, India has a legitimate concern. Plus, any political instability in Sri Lanka, there is a possibility of refugees moving towards India. So that is also a concern for us. So with all these things, India recommended that Sri Lanka should undertake 13th Amendment to their constitution, to the Sri Lankan constitution. 13th Amendment. What is the 13th Amendment? Nothing. In 1987, there was an India-Sri Lanka Accord. And in this, there was an agreement that, Indian side said that Sri Lanka should give more autonomy to the Tamils. And they should establish these provincial councils. and more autonomy should be given to this provincial councils of the northern area, which is Tamil dominated. So this again has never happened. So this is the 13th amendment that I was referring to. Now this is something that can be mains as well as prelims. So there are a few issues with Sri Lanka if we talk from mains perspective. So one is this Tamil issue, how international affects the domestic politics of our country, especially the Tamil one. Then the fisherman issue is there, the controversy regarding the Kachitibu Islands. So these are the main issues. Okay, the refugee thing is also there, but I think it will be asked in macro way only, with a bigger picture in mind only. They should ask. Okay, so we have done this article. Now we move to the meeting between the leaders of North Korea and Russia. Right, so Kim Jong-un goes to Russia. They have a meeting. We don't know what they talked, but it is speculated that there is an agreement that Korea will provide weapons to Russia. Russia is in want of weapons because of the Ukraine war. It has been going on for a long time. They are short of weapons. And in return, Russia will provide them North Koreans who are very isolated economically from a very, very long period of time. So things of basic necessities, so those things will be provided to them. So like grains, clothes, so those foods, oil, hard currency, those things will be provided to them. Now this meeting over here marks the herald or new era of ties. North Korea was very isolated because of the concern about nuclear proliferation. So if North Korea, if Russia deal takes place, there is a friendship. So there is a normalization of ties. So that in that sense, it is a new era. Let's move to this one. A very short one. Google search sway challenged as biggest antitrust trial begins. So this trial is in US antitrust trial. So it is in US. There is a US district judge which is hearing this case, who happens to be of Indian origin, Amit Mehta. Okay. So a complaint has been raised that Google, which we all use for search, so the search is manipulated. It is manipulated in such a way that monopoly of Google is maintained. Right. So this is an antitrust. Antitrust means this should be a fair process, but Google is using algorithms in such a way that it benefits this company, its own company. Okay, so this case is being heard, and this would be the biggest case, as if wrongful punish, if they are found guilty, then big lawsuit will follow. Lot of compensation would have to be given to the competitors, etc. Okay, next article. US Speaker directs panel to open Biden impeachment probe. Okay. So US Speaker, that means the US Congress, we're talking about the Congress over here. So or legislature, let's say. So the Speaker of this McCarthy, he has said that it's fine. You have this impeachment probe against the president of US. Impeachment means the initiation, or it's a process of removal of the president. Now for the process of removal of the president, first, whatever charges, whatever complaints have been raised against the president, they have to be observed, right? They have to be validated. So there is a House Oversight Committee, so which has investigated, and they have found that there is a culture of corruption. It's in inverted commas. So culture of corruption in the Biden family, and therefore the president must go. Now, interestingly, these terms being allowed, culture of corruption, this is very biased. So I was Googling, so he happens to be from the Republican Party, while President Biden happens to be from the Democratic Party. Right, so different parties. In fact, the committee was also of the Republicans. Next article, we come to the front page now. Inflation eases from 15-month high, but still sticky. Factory output shows uptick. It's bad, actually, very bad. You see the inflation, imagine this is the graph. So inflation was at it was at 7.44%. 7.44% in July 2023. Which inflation? CPI, retail inflation. Now it is at 6.8%. So it has eased. But tell me, what relief is it for a consumer at the end of the day? Because inflation is still going up. The prices are still going up. P1, P2. So the prices are still going up at a very fast rate. In fact, 6.83% is beyond the comfort level of the RBI also. So the RBI and the government has an agreement that they will target the inflation at 4% plus minus 2%. So even if on the plus side it will be 6%, but it is 6.83%. And given that inflation was already very high, so on that if you add, it is again a steep inflation, right? So this is not good. Okay. So the inflation thing is not good. The prices are high. Now there is an explainer section also where it simply says that it's because of the food prices and some commodity prices going up. And this happens at a bad time where consumer sentiment is not good. So consumer sentiment we get to know from an agency known as CMIA, a private agency, not for profit agency, a research agency, which is looking at consumer sentiment when it comes to buying of durable goods. Right. So that is not good. People are not willing to spend. Their salaries are not increasing. That is the main point. So incomes are not increasing while the prices are increasing at a much faster rate. Okay. Besides this, we get this information that this data is released by the National Statistical Organization. 105 antiquities smuggled out of India returned home, 16 more on way. Okay. So yes. So no, I'm not very sure if this is like important as such. These which sandstone terracottas are, it's more or less well defined from exam point of view, the topics. Okay. Now the only thing is that they're returning out of India, returning back to India. So which convention looks into it? Which international convention? Because this is a global issue. So there must be a platform for global cooperation. So this happens under the provisos of UNESCO convention. So UNESCO looks into it. And the exact name of the convention is Fight Illicit Trafficking of Cultural Property. So this decides, okay, fine, this has been taken from a particular country, this has to be returned, and the world has to work on this issue. Obviously, there is a need for a cooperation. This is not really important. War, territorial integrity, Ukraine. German envoy reveals who wanted what. So on the declaration, who all wanted what. It's more like a gossip thing as far as we UPSC people are concerned. Okay, now we'll just zoom out and I somehow missed this. This is about Narega. So 53.2% of total available financial grant utilized halfway through fiscal. 21% of Narega work completed. So I think basically we should have this Narega. The analysis that we should be doing is we should have the definition of Narega, the objectives, the need for it, the shortcomings, the concerns, the assessment in the last 15 years of Narega. So that is something that we should actually work from exam point of view. Punjab fast turning into junkyard of stubble management machines. Okay, machinery. So we have all these machines, right? So in the Punjab region, Haryana region, the stubble burning issue is pronounced, especially during before the winter season. So the pollutants, when this is burnt, pollution happens. It affects the NCR region. Okay, so it is believed that we should, this stubble is there. We should use these machines which remove the stubble, so that we do not have to use the expensive labor. But these machines have a shelf life, they are going bad, they are not being maintained. So this is becoming a junkyard of machinery. So what can be done? So in the entire thing, the main thing is that we should have rental arrangement, so that renting is done, or custom hiring models should be there, so that people in need of machines, they can just rent it. So in that way, we will not, the farmers really don't have to buy the machines. When they need, they can just rent and use it, because it's not required through the year, right? So that is something that can be done. So custom hiring models or rental approach should be taken up. So custom hiring approach, custom hiring centers, CHC. Day after release, Jota calls for Andolan against drugs. Okay, so what needs to be done? Andolan means community engagement on the issue of drugs. That's very much required, right? So same things I would like to say with drugs also, like there is the demand side of drugs and supply side. So when we say that the government is working on arresting people and arresting under the NDPS Act and everything, so they're looking into the supply side of things. We have to look at the demand side also, that people actually do not use drugs. And sensitization has to be done, community participation has to be done, Andolan mode has to be followed. So that approach is also very much required. Okay. Supreme Court rejects government plea to defer hearing on validity of sedition until House decision. Okay. Sedition. I'm not discussing sedition today. Sedition is basically section 124 of IPC-C, Indian Penal Code. And it's basically, if somebody says, it has an ambiguous definition. And if somebody says something against the state, that person may be arrested for about 2 years and more. So the person may be arrested. So a lot of people actually were arrested on the grounds of sedition. So many a times it was felt that this is unconstitutional. It violates Article 19, freedom of speech and expression. It is ambiguously worded. But Supreme Court, various times, it has looked into the issue of Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, and it has said that we need to alter the definition, but it is not that this law is unconstitutional. This law is very much valid, may be required also, but it is, maybe we need to reword certain things. Okay. Now this is being heard, now that we have the Bharat Nayaka Samhita, the new IPC. So the old IPC was there, then we have the new law now. So the new law, it is being said that it is even worse. And the advocate Kapil Sibal is saying, and we need to hear it. We have to hear out the new amendments that have been made. Plus there are many people who are in the jail because of the 124A of IPC. So we need to fast track this hearing in the Supreme Court. South Korea committed to boosting defense ties with India. Very good. Okay. So, fine. So there are basically two things. This is just the heading. So with the defense thing, example has been given of prior engagement. So one is K9 Vajra has been mentioned. K9 Vajra, which is a self-propelled howitzer. So let me show you this machine. This is K9 howitzer. This is not a tank, it's an artillery thing, right? It's a big gun. So this has been designed by the South Korean company, manufactured by India. Okay. So more such cooperation can be done. That's the main point. So that is one thing. Second thing is, the envoy said that we need to increase the economic engagement. We need to upgrade our relationship, which is presently Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So this has to be upgraded. Next LSE focus as Rajnath, Defense Minister, inaugurates 90 border infrastructure projects. So LSE means line of actual control, and this is in this is with the border areas that we have with China, particularly the Arunachal Pradesh and the Ladakh region. Okay, now we have weak border infra as compared to China. The way in which Chinese can mobilize their troops, we are far behind that. And one of the reasons is also the geographical terrain. So if we want parity between China and India, we need to upgrade our border infrastructure. Now, today's article is basically talking about roads. So it can be roads, it should be rails also, and it should be airfields, right? So airfields and roads only are mentioned, but I know that rails are also there. So more investment is required because this will allow for greater mobility of troops and equipments along the LSE region. Remember when the Galwan issue had happened, people had to walk through difficult terrain. So if they can go by road, etc., it will take much lesser time. So that's why. Okay, so this is it. Now what? Now let's go more into the exam mode. So when we talk about border infrastructure projects, which scheme of the government are we talking about? So we're talking about the border infrastructure management scheme. Okay, it's not there. So border infrastructure management. Yes, so border infrastructure management scheme, which is actually coming under Ministry of Home Affairs. Okay. So this is an umbrella scheme under which there are various other initiatives. So one is the comprehensive integrated border management, which is concerning the patrolling of the border areas. Then one is about the road and rail airfield infrastructure, right? So that can be there. Besides, we can also talk about upgradation of the border areas, the villages, etc. So that may also come under the border infrastructure management scheme. Right, so backwardness in the border areas, that may be addressed. Nagaland House seeks Nagaland House resolution seeks exemption from Uniform Civil Code. So Uniform Civil Code basically means same set of personal laws for the whole of the population. Now, personal laws of tribals are different. Personal laws of Hindus are different. Muslims are different. Well, obviously, that will create a friction within the society. Now, tribals, Nagaland is of course a tribal state, more of tribal population, so they are all the more concerned, and they have sought that uniform civil code, if applicable to, if implemented, it should not apply to Naga people. Now so some more news now. We have left-wing extremism, fake and counter allegations over here. Okay. Left-wing extremism, we can prepare as to from GS3. There is a set pattern over here from exam point of view. So one is, it's basically saying trends in left-wing extremism. In any answer, you have to write this irrespective, even if it is not asked in the exam. Trends in left-wing extremism. We have to have definition, basic things. The reasons of left-wing extremism. Measures and initiatives taken by the government. Way forward. So irrespective of the question, you can see the analysis of the GS3 paper. You will find more or less same thing has to be written, even if the question is framed a bit differently. Every 2-3 years a question is asked. Nipah virus is there in news. It's a very bad, in Kerala, 2 people have died. Those who were infected, they are dead. Okay. So let's briefly, okay, it's not, yeah, it's there. Nipah virus. So Nipah virus, as the name goes, it is a viral infection. It has a high mortality rate. So people who get into the contact with the Nipah virus, more likely to die. It's a sad state of affairs. There is no medicine, there is no vaccination, there is no medication or antibody concerning Nipah virus. Normally, the death is due to hemorrhage. Okay, now this virus is hosted by animal hosts such as the fruit bats. It is prevalent in Australia, Asia, Africa. Now we have had earlier instances of Nipah virus also 2021. So now it is 2023, so 2021, and it started for the first time reported in 2001. Now, what is Kerala doing with regard to this? So they are looking at having antibiotics, monoclonal antibodies for treatment. We have to still try, even if we don't have a specific medicine for this, monoclonal antibodies. Then the state is looking at creating containment zones. So people who have been affected, the areas, so containment zones for those, like we had it in the COVID. Then the local bodies like local panchayats and health workers are contact tracing. They are identifying the people who are infected and the people around those who they may have been in touch with, the immediate family members, etc. So that also they are doing contact tracing. Center Navy stitched together plan to revive maritime heritage. I was hoping to get more on the maritime heritage. All we get today is there is this stitched ship which used to be used by the sailors. So a 21 meters ship which will have 13 people, stitched ship. It used to be, it was used, but Europeans stopped using it. So this is a model of a stitched ship, which is nothing but it is planks of wood. So, we cannot have a single piece of wood. So planks of wood, they are stitched together with ropes, etc. So that is stitched or ship. Now, what was the issue? Europeans started to use cannons on the ship. So when the cannons were used, with the recoil of the gun could not be sustained by these stitched ships, and therefore they had to let go of this technique. And I think we can always look at maritime heritage, right? We can work more on this otherwise. Stitched ship is one of the examples. India's ancient maritime heritage. In fact, that can be prepared for GS1 history point of view, ancient history especially, can be done. Name of the ports, the areas where we used to travel. Yesterday's news was a good example of maritime heritage. Yesterday's news, that article which I spent a good time, and the one I shared questions on the Telegram as well. Okay, for G20 leaders, the G20 leaders came, so they were given gifts by India naturally. Okay, so hamper full of India's rich crafts and organic produce. So what all things were given? So these may be important for prelims. So let's see. A famous ittar from Kannauj. What is an ittar? It is a perfume. Saffron from Kashmir and the Pashmina shawl. The Pashmina shawl is sourced from the Changtani goat. If you are attempting these insights on India test series, the second test of theirs will have this question on Pashmina goat and Pashmina shawl coming from the Changtani goat. And why is it so? Because it is in NCERT. Okay, so this is there. Besides, these were given in the sanduk made of shisham. Shisham is valued for its durability and grain pattern. Besides coffee, which coffee? Araku coffee. The types of coffee in India, maybe that you can look at. Araku coffee grown in Araku Valley of Andhra Pradesh. And tea from Nilgiris. So these things were given. Besides, khadi scarf was given, and there is a reference of Mahatma Gandhi in that regard also. And then there was a coin given with having the G20 logo and the theme Vasudev Kutumbakam. And opinion page. So today I'm doing this article, a privacy report card. and this one, Africa at the high table, that is African Union's entry into the G20. Let us cover the other ones also as to what all things are covered, so we should have a basic idea. So rise and pause. So this is concerning the rise of the stock market. Nifty is at 20,000. Fine, good, that's good. Okay, but there are concerns over valuation. So this is too high. So because the valuations are high, we will expect a shorts. We would expect a selling over here, and this, so one should be cautious while investing in stock markets at the moment. And this high valuation is particularly for the mid cap and small cap companies. Back to the brink. This is about Maratha politics. At the moment, not very inclined to cover this. Just stargazing. This is about the recent controversy which come to light that the Indian football team was being selected on the advice of the astrologer. So yeah, so maybe you can use these points in the essay writing, right, where the lack of scientific temper in our country. So maybe in those lines you can work on. Okay, a privacy report card. This is basically an assessment of the Supreme Court and what is it, how it has been dealing with the judgments concerning privacy. Now, before starting, let me tell you that this topic may be important, should be important for your GS2, not this entire article, but just this theme, like what is the government doing, what is the Supreme Court and its judgments concerning privacy, what has its traditional stance, or it may be asking you about a particular judgment which is dealing with privacy. Right, so on these lines, we should look at preparing this topic. Now let's come to today's article. So it is saying that in the last 6 years, Supreme Court has expanded freedoms, especially concerning privacy. So first of all, we have the KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court held that right to privacy is a fundamental right. Right. And it also stressed the need for a data protection law, which we now are actually having it, digital data protection law. Okay, so privacy is a fundamental right. It is a very important right under Article 19 and 21 of the Constitution. Actually, it is normally seen under Article 19, but this case made it Article 21. And with reference to privacy, it expanded the scope of privacy. It said that privacy is not mere physical invasion into one's life, but it is physical privacy involves is a much broader construct. It enables a person to make free decisions. It allows a person to live with dignity and autonomy. So it added the strings of dignity and autonomy. Right. So right to live with dignity, right to life, and right to life with human dignity is actually a core construct of Article 21 of the Constitution. Okay, so that is one thing, right? It protected, it safeguarded privacy. And here, one more thing, I'm adding this content over here. Supreme Court said in the Puttaswamy cases that there may be issues where privacy has to be compromised in light of public interest, like public safety. You want to, surveillance is required at times, especially when we're looking at terrorism related activities. So on what grounds can privacy be breached? Obviously, no right is absolute. There are reasonable restrictions. So the Supreme Court in the Puttaswamy case laid a test. And please, these points are important. I would advise you to memorize it. So first is state action on grounds privacy can be taken away. State action concerning taking away of privacy must have a legislative mandate. Second, it must be pursuing a legitimate state purpose. For example, public safety, etc. Not for snooping on people from opposition party, judges, etc. Not that. Third, it must be proportionate. It must be proportionate to the degree of risk. So both in its nature and extent. So you cannot have absolute breach of privacy also even if you have to breach privacy. So it has to be proportionate to the degree of threat. And the least intrusive approach has to be followed to meet the ends. Fine, so that was the Puttaswamy case. And this is the test laid by the Puttaswamy judgment concerning privacy. And it also laid down the doctrine of proportionality. Next, concerning privacy only, it decriminalized adultery. Okay, on the grounds of sexual autonomy and privacy, and excessive state involvement in married life of individuals. So obviously, adultery is somebody else's spouse, but it is still concerning privacy. If the state goes into it, it is breaching one's privacy. So on these grounds, it decriminalized adultery. So this is again concerning the privacy. Now it is saying that Supreme Court will hear a lot of judgments which may be concerning privacy, and the state and the court must continue to do so. So what cases it will be hearing now in the times to come? We expect the case concerning Pegasus spyware. So that may be heard. Pegasus, again, we have a video. Then right to marriage of people within the LGBTQ community. Maybe this will also have an element of privacy. Then the upcoming digital personal data protection law. So this may be also heard in the Supreme Court. So these are the things where Supreme Court will be hearing in the next few years. And this is a cue for you also as to these topics should be prepared. Africa at the high table. This one is about Hindutva and all those things. So again, not relevant from exam point of view. The African Union has entered into the G20. So why is it important? So first thing is African Union is obviously a big bloc. It represents Africa. So having its membership in G20 is significant. It increases the voice of the global south in G20. It makes G20 more inclusive. Right. It gives Africa voice, participation, and leadership at global high table. Then Africa has a lot of natural resources. So cooperation in that regard may also be enabled. Besides, African Union's inclusion would provide for greater partnerships, closer cooperation between when we're looking at the issues of UN, WTO, World Bank, IMF, etc. Then India wants to reform the United Nations Security Council. China is opposing it. Now, if India makes a case for African Union, Africa, so Africa may support India's cause at the expansion of the UN Security Council. Now, this argument, I find it flawed because China in itself is providing a lot of support and funding to Africa. So they may not like to disappoint China. Okay. Besides, if we are looking at, dealing with the issue of climate change, etc., so Africa is a very major bloc, and their cooperation is required. So them being on the high table, important summits, that will allow for more greater collaboration, cooperation, etc. Dear parents and students, a change in perspective is needed. There is life beyond politics, academics. Now, I know life beyond politics also seems good, but life beyond academics is also there. These days I teach for these 12 students also for this CLAT sector exams, and I see here these parents, it's pathetic the way it's tuitions and everything, all academics, no time for self-study, no time for play, etc. It's actually making these people very dull. No writing skills. Even if you want to crack the civil services, writing is more important than the academics. Creativity is more important. So more of this focus is there. It hardly matters in the scheme of things in life eventually. And parents insist the teachers should be very strict, should be, even if required, hit also. So yeah, so all the wrong things are there. Okay, Singapore economy news now. Singapore, US, UK top the outbound investment list. Includes 3 tax havens. Fine. Fine. So there are tax havens, and Indians are parking their money over there. Now this is a classic case of tax avoidance. That is one reason. Of course, it is tax avoidance. Second thing is we can build is the concerns associated with money laundering, right? Money laundering and route tripping of money. These things are not mentioned in this article. It's only giving us facts. We are building it from exam point of view. Money laundering, so that is there, and round tripping of money. That's one theme. The theme is tax avoidance. Now over here, this corporates, etc., through shell companies are doing all this. One agreement was made by the G7 in 2021. It was to have a minimum corporation or minimum corporate tax of 15%, global minimum corporate tax of 15%. So that should be there. So that these tax havens who have very low tax rates or no tax rates, they should also be applying this tax. So there was this proposal in that regard. So maybe an assessment of this proposal idea may also be taken up. So money laundering and round tripping of black money, tax avoidance, and minimum corporation tax. And besides this, I would like to add the issue of double, although this is not mentioned over here, double tax avoidance agreements. Gadkari talks of 10% more tax on candid conversation. Actually, I heard this. It was a candid conversation. He is basically telling the car companies that if you keep selling diesel, we will increase the tax so that it becomes difficult to sell diesel vehicles. No such proposal is there. Small cap index crashes because it is overvalued. A new iPhone will come. Capex loan releases to states at 50,000 crore. Fine. Center is giving money to states on terms of loans. So this is at 50,000 crores. So loans are given for asset creation. Which creation? Assets creation. Removal of additional duties on US apples, walnuts will not impact domestic producers negatively. It will rather address the issue of premium customers, premium market segment, and there it will allow more competition. Explainer. Yeah, so double whammy, high inflation following consumer sentiment. So this is the one that I actually discussed in the front page. Kim Jong-un's train is elaborated over here, right? What all things were there in this. Next, G20's climate action promise. So it's basically saying that this promise is hardly anything to address the issue of global climate change. The target is 1.5 degrees Celsius of the pre-industrial level. So that has to be achieved soonest so that the impact of global warming is manageable. So we are nowhere near that goal. Okay, so that is the basic thing. And for this, we are referring to the assessment of International Energy Agency, which is a Paris-based organization. Right, so somewhere here it was there. Yeah, in a Paris-based organization, headquarter Paris. Now your homework is to go to their website and see which reports do they publish, because that can be asked in your prelims. Okay, in this G20 summit, they said that the energy from renewable sources will be tripled. Simple. So this should be tripled across the countries, whatever capacity has been created. Okay. Now this tripling goal is so this has to be done within 7 years. This is an ambitious task. But according to the International Energy Agency, this will not be sufficient to deal with the issue of climate change or limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So it will go beyond this. So the tripling target is achieved by 2030. Even if it is achieved by the next 7 years, it alone would not be sufficient for 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, because gas emissions would exceed this level by about 24 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. Fine, so this is not sufficient. Okay. So that is one thing. We get, okay, fine, G20, they have agreed on this thing. In 7 years, renewable energy capacity will be increased. Now, naturally, you should think as to what is India's targets, India's commitments. So here are India's targets from the PIB. 500 gigawatt by 2030, 50% of energy from renewables, right? So cumulative emissions should be reduced by 1 billion tons. So all this data. Okay, so that is one thing. Besides, when we look at with this cooperation for renewable energy 3 times, we expect that International Solar Agency will play a very important role. International Solar Agency was a proposal made at the Paris Summit of Climate Change, so COP21, where India and France proposed that there should be an International Solar Agency, which is basically looking at Earth's equator. So countries in the tropics region where more sunlight comes. So these countries are also part of Global South, and they should work together, collaborate, share technologies, because the global north is not helping us, and improve your renewable energies, harness solar power, etc. So here again, we feel that ISA can play an important role. But what we see is that over the from 2015 to 2023, we see that it is only a handful of large developing countries who are working on this issue, while others are lagging behind. So it is unlikely that we will meet the target of increasing the renewable energy outcome by 3 times. Next, we need to enable solar mini grids, right? So rather than having big solar plants, we can have smaller grids which can provide electricity in remote locations. So that can be a better approach. So lesser investment would be required, and it will be distributed over bigger geographies.